Okay, welcome. Mr. Althouse, come say hello to Ms. Stessin-Cohn.
Hello.
This is Mr. Althouse. Is this your new history class?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to?
Sure. First off, thank you for coming here and presenting to our students today. My name is Phil Althouse. I teach social studies here in the high school. The course that I teach, I brought a handful of students down. It's a first-year elective course, the American Experience for People of Color and Women. The students did explore many of the topics, most notably slavery in the Hudson Valley, the differences between like northern slavery and southern slavery a little bit earlier in the course. We're now into the 20th century and the 21st century and looking at like depictions of race in film. They recently got done viewing Birth of a Nation, and then we're going to tie that into the present and negative racial stereotypes in film and television in modern society. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
It's wonderful that you offer that class.
Yeah, I'm going to absolutely. I'm just going to call back down to the office.
I got
and
you.
let them know.
Ms. Santiago, did you want to say hello to our presenter? This is Ms. Santiago. She brought her 7th and 8th graders.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this for us. And like she said, I have 7th and 8th graders, and several of them are part of our district's NAA competition, where they had to write a ballad poem about an abolitionist. So several of them submitted that.
Love to see some of those. Maybe you can email them to me.
Sure. Yeah.
See them.
Miss Ashley, you also brought some students?
Hello, thank you for taking this time to meet with us. I'm Ashley Aliano, and I have a group of a couple of 11th and 12th graders with us today.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful. And so my name is Asha Golliher. I'm the high school media specialist here at Ellenville High. So welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to have you back here for our 4th session of Our Words Matter, Your Words Matter, Caring Community Conversations. And I am thrilled to welcome a friend of mine, Susan Stessin-Cohn. We've had the opportunity to work together on archival committees. And Susan is, or Ms. Stessin-Cohn, how would you prefer to be called today? Susan. So Susan is the town historian for New Paltz. Has everybody here heard of New Paltz across the river? Yep. She is their town historian. And this book, In Defiance, is the result of some research that she and a colleague, an archivist there, did. And so this is a great passion of Susan. So she's an author, a historian, and an archivist, and a quilter. That quilt on the wall behind her is hers. She has made that. It's a work in progress. So Susan, without further ado, thank you so very much. We are going to encourage questions. And I do want to remind everyone that our dialogue today will be respectful. Some of the things that we are talking about are difficult. We're talking about slavery. We're talking about runaways from slavery. We're talking about enslavers. This is our history. This is our American history. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk and to learn and to respect and to rehumanize each and every one of us. So thank you. Let's give her a warm Ellenville welcome. What do you say?
Okay, so since I don't have as long of an amount of time that I normally do, I'm going to get right into my presentation. And again, as was just said, I have some questions for you that are going to get fielded to all of you. And then please, it's really important to me to get questions from you because I'm here to help you understand a really sad and horrific part of our history, as was said already. This outline is actually a man that was enslaved in the 19th century, early 19th century, from the northern area. We don't know exactly where, but it was in a notice. And this covered the book, which you've obviously seen. And again, something that I wanted to remind you of, that the book has hundreds and hundreds of notices, and there will be a copy in your library. So those of you that want to see more notices and read them, that's where you'll get to see them. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I thought this pyramid was really important to show you, and especially helps understand why I'm using runaway notices to help learn about people that lived hundreds of years ago. When you look at the bottom of this pyramid, you could actually see that represents everything that happened in the past. As you go up here, and when you get to the very, very, very tip here is the interpreted past, and the very, very top is actually what you see in your textbook. So as a historian, and those of you that are historical detectives and want to really learn about the past, you want to get as far down to the actual past as you can. And one of the ways that we can do that is by using primary sources. And I think most of you must have learned about that in school already. And I'll let your teachers take off on that. I like to use quotes, and this is a quote that's going to actually come back around. We'll talk about it again at the end of the presentation, but I'm going to read it to you. If I was there, I'd ask someone else to read it. But you think that just because the past has already happened, the past is finished and it's unchangeable. Oh no, the past is cloaked in multicolored taffeta, and every time we look at it, we see a different hue. Now, I just want to explain to you that taffeta is a kind of fabric that's almost rainbow colored, that if you move it one way, you see one color. If you move it another way, you see another color. So is there anyone there that would want to talk about that quote a little bit, or you have an idea about what that means? Any volunteers there?
Different, everything, if everything's different color, there's so many different ways of seeing it. There's so many different views, opinions, truth is subjective and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Am I anywhere close?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, so one thing I thought of was the idea of layers. Every time we look at it, we maybe see another layers. Sometimes I've heard history compared to an onion, peeling an onion.
Yeah, something like that. And again, we'll talk a little at the end about it. But for me, sometimes I'll be researching something and 10 years later, I'll find another document and it says something totally different. And then all of a sudden I have to rearrange my thoughts and think again about what I was researching. Okay, this is a little chart. I don't know if it's big enough for them to read it there. But what I did was I took 25-year increments and I totaled up the number of people, of enslaved people that were bound and taken on ship against their will and brought to the Americas. This is just to what we call the United States now. So when you see embarked, this is how many people boarded the ships, and this is how many people survived the voyage. And those of you that have taken the class already, that are taking the class on, I forgot the name of it, but you've talked about slavery already and enslavement. You might have studied some of this about the Middle Passage. And this is actually a real manifest from one of the ships. Here's another quote that I want to get a volunteer to tell me what you think this means. I prayed for 20 years and I received no answer until I prayed with my legs. Frederick Douglass. Can you get another volunteer for me?
Sure. What does that mean? I prayed with my legs until I prayed with my legs.
And obviously you can see that's a wonderful photo of Frederick Douglass.
Any interpretations? What do you think it means? Let's try it. No right or wrong. We're just talking. Anybody? Yeah? I'm gonna call on somebody. Oh my God. Eva? How about you? What do you think that means, hon?
At first I thought like maybe you might not get it at first until you really try for what you wanted or you work for it.
Okay, keep going. Well, what about my legs? And take a look at the image that's there and what the talk is about today. So he was praying for freedom, but the only way he was going to get his prayers answered was with his legs.
Yeah, I was gonna say when he was working for like what he wanted, or like when he was like trying to live by like certain circumstances.
Okay.
He was enslaved, so he prayed for freedom. You got an idea? Great. Perfect. Good job, Eva. Yes.
If you want something, you just have to go for it.
Okay.
You have to go for it. In this case, maybe literally. Anybody else? Yes, go for it. Hold on.
He had to run away.
Yeah, you got it. And actually that quote is how we began our book, because I thought it was so important.
That's right. So good. Good work.
Thank you both. Thank you. Thank all three of you for that. Okay, big question. Why do I use runaway notices to learn about what life was like for enslaved people? Okay. These are the kind of things that you can find in a runaway slave notice. The name of the person, how old they were, male or female, what they looked like, their complexion, what color was their skin, what kind of skills they had, and we'll talk about some of these things, how tall they were, how big they were, if they had different kind of scars on their body. And there was something called African scarifications, because some of the small tribal groups in Africa, there were actually different types of markings. They were actually done, not like tattoos, but they were actually cut into the face to make scars. The languages people spoke, what their personality was like, where they were born, who their former enslaver might have been, clues on where they might be headed, and the type of clothing they were wearing, and things that they took with them. This can help really give us a picture of a person. Not every notice has all of that, but we can get some of that. So here's another question I want to put out to all of you. What do you think could happen to somebody if they ran away and they were caught? So what kind of risks are people taking by running away?
Being killed.
They
Being
can be killed, but for enslavers, these people were considered slaves, and so they were considered property, unfortunately. It's hard for me to say. So they were considered valued. So what else would have happened if you were caught?
Yeah, they probably got beat,
Yeah,
like whipped.
absolutely.
They probably got harsher conditions in them fields, you know.
Yes.
I don't really know.
No, but
What else?
that's good. Yes, we have another. Awesome. Can you pass this mic?
What do you want to say? Yes.
Tortured.
Come on, Brooklyn. Don't be shy. What do you want to say?
Tortured.
Tortured. Uh-huh.
Yes, okay.
So all of, did more people want to speak, or should I go on? It's
Is
hard.
there anybody virtually, anything in the chat room that people wanted to say? You can put it in the chat, not right now. Okay, well, we'll have another chance for discussion later. Thank you. Good job, everybody.
Okay. So actually one of the first things that could happen is that when a person was caught, they would be sold. And that could be a really horrible thing for someone, especially if they had a wife, children, parents, close friends, and you'd be sold to another enslaver. That's one thing. Somebody said beaten, and absolutely, people were flogged. People were, and you can see that on the notices because you can see things like scars on their back, scars here. This is, again, this is harsh. And again, this isn't, we're talking the truth here. And actually times toes were cut off of people. And you can see notices where they say this one has a toe that's missing. One of the worst penalties was actually being sent down to the islands, to the Caribbean, because most people didn't survive it. So the first person that said they'd be killed, yes, they would be sold to the islands so the enslaver could get money, but most people didn't actually make it when they were sent down to the islands. So it was very dangerous to run away. And you also had the elements. Because again, we're used to winters here. We say, oh my God, it's 5 degrees. It used to go like maybe 10, 15 degrees below zero. And so in the wintertime, there were wolves, bears. You could have something happen like that, just in the running away, that, you dealt with the elements. So here's an example of a notice of a man, Tom, who ran away. And actually, here he is for sale after he was caught. So again, why did people risk so much to flee? Because they wanted to be free. And that's the thing that every single notice, you feel it in the notice. People wanted their freedom. People did not want to be enslaved. So they risked everything. So what I did was I took a notice from the book of a young man named Robin. It's a pretty long notice, so I'm not going to read it to you. And actually, Maybe if you're really interested, your teachers could make a copy of that notice. I can let you know what page it's on. But they're identity markers for Robin. These are things that would help somebody, for us to learn about them, or for a slave catcher or a bounty hunter would look for certain things. And I made some of them, I yellowed some of the things about Robin, but the notice says that in 1762, a man that lived in Westchester, a Dr. Thomas Wright, put this notice in the issue of a newspaper. And it says in the beginning, he ran away from the care of the constable. So that clue is already, we know that he ran away, was caught and jailed, and ran away again. So his name is Robin. And it goes on to describe him. And this is something we're going to talk about that's important. He has a scar on his left arm by inoculation. We'll talk about that after. Corns on his toes. He's 28, was born in Westchester. And then it talks about the different things. He was a good brewer, a shoemaker, all the things he took with him. And they think that he might have obtained a pass from some ill-disposed person. Here's something else really important. Oops, let me go back a second. It says here that he will try to get to the northern parts of this province amongst the 5 nations of Indians. And that's something else we might have time to talk about as well. Why so many people of color that ran went up to 5 nations where they were safe, staying with Native people. So once a notice was placed in a paper, there were different ways that someone would be captured. One was actually bounty hunters that would go after people because they would get a reward for it. Everyday people that just saw somebody and wanted to get the reward, or the enslaver themselves would look after them. But what I realized was what I see in the notices and what we see in the 500 or so notices that are in the book, it's really just the tip of the iceberg, because most people were caught ever before a notice was placed in the paper. Okay, here's more questions for you. When you look at the gender, that's male or female, of enslaved people, only about 18% of the people that ran away were women. And I call them freedom seekers. Those are people that ran away to get their freedom. So we call them freedom seekers. Why do you think so few women ran away to escape bondage? So that means 80% were men, or almost 82% were men, 18% were women. Why do you think so many more men than women ran away?
Any thoughts? Mr. Althaus's class? Right, yeah, absolutely. Come stand at the podium so I can see.
As bad as this may sound, I can see a lot of male slaves were put in something like manual labor and women were put in the house. I could see it being a lot harder to escape from the house and that first step than escaping from a field of a slaver.
Perfect.
Even as bad as it may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't want to leave their children behind.
Yeah.
You didn't want to leave their children behind. Thank you, Ms. Lindhart. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Ryan. Any other thoughts why so few women seem to run?
They covered the most important ones, and one was obviously if they had young children, they didn't want to leave their children. Even though enslaved women did take their children with them sometimes, it was a lot harder to leave. But also the other thing about men are out in the fields, men get to know the territory more. They have more freedom than the women that are often stuck in the houses. And they have more opportunity to even maybe talk to other enslaved people and plan it with other people to run. We have notices that 5 people got together and ran together. So those answers were perfect. And that's just a chart. And the book has lots of charts, and there's years and the number of women that ran. And here's just an example. Charity and her son, Peter, run away on Saturday, the 21st instant. A likely Negro wench named Charity, about 19 years of age, 5 foot high. She took a child with her about 2 years old named Peter, who frequently calls the mother by name. It is probably she may endeavor to get to the White Plains, as she was bought from Dr. Graham about 10 months since and seemed anxious to get back. So here's a woman probably left her husband or her mother or her father, and she was sold somewhere and just wants to get back to where she was. Months of escape. Okay, what do you think most obvious month that slaves would be escaping, enslaved men
What's
and
the best month to escape if you're going to run? May. What else? Say. April. How come?
It's like kind of like between winter.
So April, like it's early spring? Yes, ma'am. March. How come? Increasing spring. So we have some voting for spring. And what else?
nothing else, just spring.
Yeah, hold on.
Probably late February.
How come?
Because it's starting to get warmer.
Okay, late February. So everybody's waiting for winter to finish. What? Who else? Yes.
Like October.
October. How come October? Think. What's going on in October? Fall. But what else is happening? Think. Yes.
Okay, which month?
Right. Okay, so I couldn't quite hear you. So can you say it again in the mic for me? Do you feel comfortable? Yeah. Go. Thank you. Say it one more time. October.
October because they can hide in the leaves.
Okay, great.
You were close. October gets the prize because September, if you can see on this chart, does anyone want to guess why September? What goes on in September? Think about farm.
Yeah, we live in a farming valley. What happens that time of year? Pumpkins. What do you do with pumpkins? You don't leave them in the field. You pick them. You harvest them. It's harvest season.
Right. So this is when there's big commotion, harvesting going on out in the fields constantly. And this seemed to be the time most people ran. Second best, July.
Second best July because it was warm.
You know, you don't see a lot of people going away in the winter when it's really cold. The age of people, actually, most people, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but young men, 18 to 22, this was a rare notice. This was a man that was 55 from New Paltz. This was, and most enslaved people did not live that old. And here's a man with a limp, and he's running away, and he ran away in May, named Sam. So remember I said before something about Robin had said he has a scar on his left arm by inoculation?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a little something. So there was a man by the name of Reverend Cotton Mather who actually enslaved a man named Onesimus. Onesimus came from Africa, and he said that in Africa, where he lived, that when smallpox came there, they came up with an idea that if they actually cut the pustule, like the little pussy part of a smallpox, and made a little slit on someone's arm and put it there, they would get a very mild case of smallpox and they wouldn't die. And actually, they called that variolation. And we actually started doing that in the early 1700s. They started doing it in Boston. But the problem was that other diseases were also carried with that. And so they outlawed it until the Revolutionary War, when there were thousands of men put together in tents, and they were all catching smallpox. So they actually brought this variolation back, and variolation actually became something called vaccination, which I think we've all heard a lot about recently in the last year or so. But that's where it came from. Came from an enslaved man in Africa.
I wish I'm sorry you can't see our faces more up close, because when you talked about getting something from inside a pustule, we had some great looks on everybody's faces.
I know they like that kind of stuff. I wish I was there.
Oh, it's fascinating, actually. So you're not going to believe, but I'm going to give you a bit of a time warning. So, yeah.
How much time is left?
Well, it is now 25 after 2.
Yeah.
And so we have about 6 minutes.
Oh, boy. Okay, languages spoken. Take a list of all the language that are spoken. So these are enslaved people that once they were sold from one person, they were sent to another person who maybe spoke a different language. Skills. These are the types of skills: blacksmith, brushmaker, farmers, preachers, musicians. These are the type of skills enslaved people had. Items taken with them. All different types of things were taken with them. And especially clothing, because when you ran away, again, you didn't have stores like we have now. You couldn't go in and just get clothing. So whatever you were wearing was often a clue to bounty hunters. And then he was wearing a red cape and had brown pants on. So you tried to take other clothes with you. Here was a man, Jacob. It's supposed he had with him a black and white spotted dog answering to the name of Venture. And since we found other notices where enslaved people took animals with them. Here's a man, Ishmael, who actually ran and took his 3 children with him. I'm trying to go fast here.
So while you're sort of coming to where you want to get, I was really struck the first time I heard you present and the first time I really delved into the book, how the skill level represented by, from beekeeping to sewing to blacksmithing to knitting to all of it, really belied the general overview that was presented of the kinds of persons that were enslaved.
Right, and if you look at the notices from the New York area, from this New York City, you see wig makers, cabinet makers, even more, because up here a lot of the skills that enslaved people were taught was farming, because that's what was needed.
Yeah, and so there was no quote-unquote lesser quote-unquote race in at all. Yeah.
Not at all. And here's a man that actually ran with 5 sheep and a beehive, which I thought was interesting. Yaff. Robin, he ran alone, but as I said before, people ran with other siblings, with children, with families, all different people. Here's the notice that came from Shawangunk, which I can't read, but you can actually see that in the book when you go to the library. This is a really important notice because it deals with a woman named Sojourner Truth. But
how many people here know Sojourner Truth? Surely you've heard of her. So
yes.
Sojourner Truth lived in Ulster County, and this is a recent document. Am I correct?
I think we're the only ones that have found it.
So, and when did you find this?
About 2 years ago.
About 2 years ago. So history is still in the making.
Well, and what's really in the making is this, and it was on CNN today, a document that was found at the New York Archives 2 weeks ago sheds a whole different light on Sojourner Truth and how she, when her name was Isabella Van Wagenen, fought for her son, Peter, which I can't get into all of that with you, but teachers can find out about it because it's in the news now.
And this was found in the New York State Library, am I correct?
On the New York State Archives.
In the New York State Archives.
In one of their boxes.
In a box full of papers.
Yeah, I want to read this to you because when you talk about primary sources, when you want to take a look at, if you said to somebody, if anyone wanted to see how cruel enslavement was, I'm going to read this to you. A hardy, strong Negro wench, sober and honest, with 2 female children. This is a for sale notice. With one 4 years and the other 7. She was brought up in the country, but has lived some time in the city. She will be sold either with one or both of her children or without, as the purchaser shall choose. And this other notice is a smart, remarkable Negro wench being sold with a 9-month-old child. But it's up to your option if you take the 9-month-old child or not. So in terms of looking at primary sources to see how this kind of can shed a light on what enslavement was like. Some books that I think you have in your library that I think those of you that want to read more, these books are wonderful. Another book for high school students, Oni Judge, and actually this was a woman who ran away from George Washington, and this is actually the Runaway Slave Notice. And I'm going to have my last slide be the symbol for Sankofa, which means to reach back and gather the best of what our past has to teach so that we can achieve our full potential as we move forward.
So do we have any questions, or anybody, any of our virtual classrooms or teachers want to join either via chat? Questions or comment for Ms. Susan Stessin-Cohn? And we have books and the possibility of a follow-up down the road if you'd like.
Absolutely. And if anyone has any questions, I will leave, Asha, you have my email to give the teachers if anybody has questions or just want to tell me how, how they felt about this. And I know it was kind of cut short and I tried to talk kind of quickly.
No, you're fine. Our class time is very limited. And so I appreciate you fitting in this hour-long presentation into our class time. So it's wonderful to be continued. History is we're always learning more. We're always learning more. It's very important to look to primary sources for our facts. What is something else that someone took away that they'd like to share?
What I never really realized when you talk about slavery is it's all sorts of walks of life, isn't it? Like even as a slave, there are so many different types of people, if that makes sense. So many different heritages. It doesn't matter.
No, that's right. Heritage, like cultural groups, like you find some enslaved people that are part Native American, part, multiracial.
Yeah.
And you usually just say slave and leave it at that, but it's so much more complicated.
But Ryan is really stimulating a thought for me. He's really provoking something. When we look at people as people, we see their multiple faceted heritage, versus when we talk about slaves, it's not people, it's a way to dehumanize.
Yes.
And this dehumanizing element, and that's one of the things that I like about your title, In Defiance, Runaways from Slavery. It's not a book about slaves. This is a book about people who were running from slavery.
Each name in the book is a person, is another
person.
And we have a book coming out next year, the revision of this with over 200 more names in it.
And without this book or these archives or these notices in the newspaper, we wouldn't have another way to remember these people's names.
This comes from Mrs. Linhart. I would like to know about how the native languages of Black slaves were erased from their child's memory.
How it was erased, I think it was beaten often from people I know with Sojourner Truth when she tried to speak the language, even that she knew before, she was beaten until she learned either Dutch or English. You often see on some of the notices, they'll say, speaks nothing but their African. They're African. They don't use dialect. I'm trying to think of the term they use. But they were beaten until they spoke the language that their enslavers spoke. So
wonderful. Again, Susan, thank you so very much. I appreciate your passion and the hard work that has gone into this. And may we not relive this history ever. So moving forward, thank you all for coming.
Okay, and have a good day, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.